number 7. Maybe we can start with question number 6, then we'll do again question number 7. So just take note of the year and the variant so that you can actually trace it through when you are now doing your own thing. Okay, let's dive into number 6 real quick. Number 6 is saying what? Just zoom that a little bit. An algorithm will, first point is saying it will output each integer. That's our keyword. It will output each integer value between 100 and 200 that ends with a digit 7. So for example, 107, right? Then we're being told that it is going also to output the final count of the number of values that are output. So we need to be keeping track of how many numbers that you're going to be outputting. Then we asked to write a pseudocode for this algorithm. Then any variables used must be declared. So we ought to declare first, which is okay. Okay, diving into it, we need to have a variable that's going to be keeping track of how many times. It's going to be keeping track of how many times we have output a value, and we call that variable num count. Right? We'll call that variable num count. Num count like this. There's going to be a variable to keep track of how many numbers that I have entered. Then also, I need to know how many times I'm going to be staying in my loop, right? Or rather, yes, I need to know how many times I'm staying in my loop, but rather I don't need to know how many times, but I will just use this as the condition. So as long as my num, let me just use num is the variable to keep track of the numbers that are between 100 and 200 that are actually end with the letter 7. So I already know that I am supposed to be declaring these two variables, num and the num count. So the logic that I'm actually going to be using on this one is I will first have my num being set up to the number 107, right? Being set up to the number 107. Why? Because this is the first number that is between 100 and 200 that ends with the letter 7. So from there onwards, I'm just going to be incrementing the value of my num by 10, because from 107 I get to 127, 127 I get to 137. I'm going to continue doing this until the value of my num is now bigger than 200, basically. So I'm going to output every num that I have until the value of my num is now greater than 200. That's basically the logic that I'm going to be using. So the numbers that I want to output here are 107. I gotta output again 127, 137, 147, up until to 197. This is the last number that I'm supposed to be outputting. So for that now, I'll take the first time to declare, I'll use the first line to declare, and I'll declare all my values at once. So I am declaring, sorry for that. I will declare come on. I'll declare num and num count. So I'll declare num and num count. And num count, I'm going to be declaring these two as integers. Is int, like this. Right? So I need to be jumping in I need to actually initialize my value of count of num to 107. I need to initialize the value of my num count to 0. So I can actually go ahead and do that. I'll skip a line in the event that I need to declare something else. So num is going to be given an initial value of 107. Then num count an initial value of 0, because it's going to be keeping track of how many numbers that I have. So with that now having been said, I will go ahead and say now I need to repeat to do a certain sequence of steps. So I'll repeat come on, really? I'll repeat. You can fast forward this part if you already know what we are supposed to be doing. I'll repeat to output the value of num. Once I output num, I need to then increment my num count by, I need to output my num count. Then I also increment the value of my num by 10 until my value of num is now greater than 200, as I said here. So you can just fast forward this part because I'm just going to be typing exactly what I just said. So what I'm going to be doing is to output I'll output the value of my I'll output the value of num. Then I go ahead and increment the num. So my num now is now getting a new value, which is equals to the num that I had on the beginning, adding that now with 10 as I promised, right? Then we go ahead again and increment the value of num count to indicate that I have accepted one number. So my num count, my num count now is now going to be getting a new value, which is num count, the original value, plus 1, right? That's basically what I ought to do. I'm going to repeat to output the value of num. I increment the value of num plus 10. With 10, I mean to say, then I go ahead and increment the value of my num. Then what I need to do at the end of the day, I need to put the condition that I'm going to do this until the value of my num is now greater than 200, like this. Then when this has been said and done, then I will have to go ahead and end my program by outputting the value of num count, because they told me that I'm supposed to output the final count of the number of values that are output. So I need to go ahead and say what? I need to go ahead and say num output now. We have to output the value of my num count. Like this. That's how my program was going to be ending. So let's take it one more time. An algorithm will output each integer value between 100 and 200 that ends with the digit 7. For example, 107. So I need 107, 127. I left 117 there. I left 117 there. Then we output the final count of the number of values that we have output. You get the point? So how many numbers are ending with 7 that are between 100 and 200? That's basically what we are supposed to do. Then any variables must be declared. So we said we're going to be using num to keep track of the number that we are supposed to be outputting. Num count to keep track of the number of times that we have output. You get it? Then we're declaring those as integers. So num is going to be coming through, is going to be initialized to 107. Then num count is going to be initialized to 0. Then we repeat to output a number. Then we increment the value of num by 10 to get the next number that ends with 7. Then we increment again our value of num count to indicate that we have actually accepted another, we have actually output a number. At the end of the day, now we are doing this until the value of num is now greater than 200.